Hello from ChefConf 2015. My name is Lucas Welch with Chef, and I'm here with Jon Cowie from Etsy. Jon, thank you so much for being here, and welcome to ChefConf.
Thanks for having me.
So before we get going on a lot of the more technical topics, you've got a talk later today, or actually tomorrow, and we'll get a bit into that. Give us a little bit about your role at Etsy specifically.
So my official title is Staff Operations Engineer, so I'm very much in a frontline operations role. I kind of have a more general emphasis on automation and chef. It's kind of my specialist area, but in general I'm part of the team that looks after all the infrastructure that powers Etsy, all of the tooling we use to do that, everything from building servers right on up to the stacks we use to deploy applications and things, and everything in between really.
Now that sounds like a lot of responsibility and a lot of work, and you've actually blogged before about finding the right work-life balance. And so tell us, all out here in the chef community, what are some of the things we might want to think about to find that right work-life balance ourselves?
I would say the most important thing with work-life balance is giving yourself the ability.
And can there be a balance?
I would argue there can. So I work remotely. I deal with a team that's mostly shifted 5 hours behind my time. So one thing I deal with a lot is stopping work at the end of the day, because when I finish at 6 p.m. my time, everybody else is still working in the States till 11, 12 p.m. my time. So there's always the temptation, if I just check my email to see what's going on, there's always something going on and I get pulled straight back into work. So for me, I think the most important thing to strike that balance is developing good habits and discipline around stopping work when you're supposed to stop working. Like, we have a tendency as an engineering culture to prize people who burn the midnight oil, hacking away on code and stuff, which is fine if you're doing it as a hobby, but if you're doing that as part of your job, you're not giving yourself the space to decompress from your job and relax and spend time with friends and family and hobbies and things. I think that's really important for healthy body, healthy mind. And we had an excellent discussion yesterday during the community summit about the importance of mental health and discussing issues around depression and burnout and things like that. And one of the best ways to do that, along with things like having a supportive team and talking to people, is not putting yourself in a position where you're burning your body out, and you need to give yourself space to recharge your batteries. It's a very intensive job. We use our brains a lot, we use our creativity a lot, and you have to give yourself time to recover and recharge your batteries and that kind of stuff.
That's great advice. I'm going to start turning my phone off at 6 p.m. every day. So
Highly
for those that are
recommended.
working with me, you won't be able to get a hold of me after 6 p.m. So speaking more specifically about Etsy and your work there, you've actually written a couple books now on
just the one
on chef. And so tell us a little bit about the book and the philosophies and principles behind it.
So the book I wrote was called Customizing Chef. It's out with O'Reilly. What I was trying to do was write the book that I wish I'd had when I was learning chef. So it's taking you from the point, chefs do a lot of excellent material on how to get started, how to write your first recipe and cookbook, and how to run chef on a node and all that kind of stuff. Where I found the most struggle when I was starting with chef a few years back was, what do you do after that? How do you start extending chef and figure out when you've used the capabilities out of the box? Chef's designed to be extensible, but at the time I was learning, that wasn't super well documented, and that was something I struggled with personally to get to grips with. So I was trying to write the book I wish I'd had then, to tell me, once you can write recipes and you're comfortable with how everything fits together, what do you do next? How do you extend chef to solve your business specific problems, the things that don't come out of the box?
Well, I think it's awesome, and I mean that's such a great example of what the chef community is all about, is that you went out there and thought about what you would have liked when you started, and then you actually filled that need and wrote that book so that new people coming into the community can access those resources, and that just keeps the cycle going. And for all we know, one of those people will read that book and see something else that can be added to the conversation and do the same themselves.
Absolutely, that's the hope.
So, to the chef community, looking back, your experience coming in, the pros and the cons, we've got a lot of new people here at ChefConf 2015 this year. What would be some guidance you'd give them coming into the show to make the right connections, really become a part of the community, and get the most out of the experience?
I would say look out for people with the Chef Ambassadors program, people with orange stickers on their badges. That's people who've self-identified and said, I'm willing to speak to new people and help them. And also, don't be afraid to walk up to people. There are people here are fairly well known in the community. Jamie Windsor, who wrote Berkshire, Fletcher Nickel, who wrote Test Kitchen. Don't be afraid to just go up to those people and say hi. Like, they're all people. They all want to talk to other people. They have interesting stories to tell. Like, go up and speak to people you're interested in. And on a wider note, like, it's very easy nowadays to get involved with the chef community with the addition of the chef community maintenance policy and things. It's much more easy for people external to chef to get involved in writing their own cookbooks and sharing them, and actually working with the chef code in some cases. And it's a lot easier than ever to get involved. But I would encourage everybody to speak to the people with staff badges, the people with the Ask Me About the Code as Conduct t-shirts, me, anyone else you see who you're interested in speaking to. Just go up to them and introduce yourself. That's the power of
It's
conferences.
a welcoming vibe here at
It's a welcoming vibe.
And I certainly found that. I mean, when I started here, I had never been in an open source community myself, and I wasn't even sure if it was a real thing. Like, what was ChefConf going to be like? Are people really going to be welcoming and open and giving their time and talent essentially for free? And it is like that. I mean, and yourself is a great example, and there's so many others who are taking their time and talent to really contribute, which we sincerely appreciate. Obviously, DevOps, automation, cloud, open source, all really top of mind for folks here at the show. Looking back at Etsy's journey specifically, what your workflow looks like now versus before, what would be some of your kind of best practices and principles that you'd recommend folks who might be early on in their journey think about before they dive head first?
I would say the biggest thing to learn, especially when you're dealing with companies like Etsy who've kind of been doing it for quite a while, and we talk a lot about what we do. There's a tendency to assume that companies like that are a special case, that we have somehow different powers to everybody else. Whereas the things people don't see are the fact that what we talk about is the result of, in some cases, painful trial and error, like repetition and iteration, and trying something that doesn't work, improving it, iterating, and moving on. So I would say don't expect miracles overnight. Like, if you're just starting out with DevOps and automation and things like that, it's in many cases it's a radical shift for companies that maybe haven't worked that way before. So don't expect miracles overnight, and be patient and give your company time to adjust to the changes. But also on the flip side, don't look at people who've been doing it for longer, like Etsy and GitHub and all those companies out there doing this. Like, look at those companies and remember that they're all human too, and that the things they're doing took just as much time to develop as the things that other companies are doing. There's no magic sauce that makes us different to anyone else. We're just maybe a little bit further down the road than some companies that are starting out.
And if you have an open mind and you're out there willing to take different perspectives and different guidance, then everybody can go through that same process.
Absolutely.
Trial and error, make small mistakes, but then learn from those and move forward.
And the whole, we already kind of accept blameless postmortems as an accepted part of business nowadays. We did one for the last Chef client release yesterday in the Chef Community Summit. But taking that blameless approach of looking at a problem and learning why what you did made sense at the time, and then looking at how you could have done it better and moving on. That applies just as much to organizational culture as it does to technology. So, for example, at Etsy, we started using the Kanban methodology to guide how we were working in the operations team for a while. And it turned out there were a bunch of pain points with Kanban that didn't mesh with the way we work, specifically the limit on the amount of work in progress tickets you could have at a time. That was a massive pain for us, and it became a blocker because our director was the only person who had the authority under Kanban to move tickets back and forth between swim lanes. So we scrapped that. We removed the limit on work in progress. Now operations engineers are able to move tickets back and forth.
And you eliminated that bottleneck.
And we eliminated the bottleneck. So don't go into things with too closed a mindset, and don't be afraid to try things and mess up, because that's how you learn. And honestly, the reason we are where we are now is because we tried and failed and iterated and improved a whole bunch of different times over the years.
That's great advice. So Jon's going to be doing a book signing actually this afternoon at 4:50 p.m.
4:50.
Right here in the main exhibit hall for Customizing Chef, and he's speaking tomorrow at 1:15 in Mission City B4 and B5, and specifically you're talking about separating the signal from the noise. And with so much information, processes, tools, and ways that you can construct workflows, give us a little guidance on what your talk's about and that topic of separating the signal from the noise.
So the general idea behind my talk is when you're trying to design your own chef workflow, you're trying to find, what's the current best practice, what are other people doing? And because of the very nature of chef means that everybody's trying to solve different problems, you tend to find a lot of conflicting views on you should use this tool or you should use this aspect of chef, or that's a bad thing, you should never do that. But when you're dealing with what are often quite prescriptive guidance from different quarters, you have to try and figure out which bits of that are relevant to solve the problem you're trying to solve. So what I'm trying trying to do is kind of distill that down into some actionable items for how to take that information and process it and turn it into something that's useful for your company and solving your problems without having to be too prescriptive about this didn't work for company X, so we can't do this. Where in actual fact, that might be exactly what you were looking for. So I'm trying to just distill that down into actionable information on when you're trying to figure out your workflow. How do you do that in amongst all these conflicting opinions?
That's fantastic. So again, folks, that talk will be at 1:15 tomorrow, April 2nd. And Jon, thank you so much for all you're doing for the community, for being here, and for taking the time with me today.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you.